Right now, things are going rather awry for Trump as it pertains to his, as he calls it, big, beautiful bill, which is rather ugly to be described as beautiful. This includes the Medicaid cuts and then the tax cuts for the rich. And the reason he calls it big is he's trying, I know, because of its unpopularity, to shove through all in one big reconciliation bill his whole legislative agenda, which is mostly terrible. We'll get to that. We'll get to how the hearings on this have been going. A Republican speaking out against the Medicaid cuts. Crazy. But listen, it looks like right now Republicans are still very divided, which is bad news for Trump. Good news, I guess, for us. But remember that this is not something Trump takes nicely. So behind the scenes is crazy whenever Republicans resist his agenda here. Headlines like this: stop grandstanding. Trump yells at Republican holdouts threatening to sink budget bill. Or this: Trump screaming call and GOP moderate misery. And it tells these stories we've gone through in more detail before of him calling up the Republicans who have some questions, whether because they want to be more extreme or less extreme, and him literally being overheard. One of the anecdotes was like someone over there could hear his voice shouting at one of these Republican Congress members, and so then they changed their stance on it because this is his whole agenda. Now, why someone would fight this hard for something so terrible, I don't know, but he really wants those tax cuts. So we'll get to what we know now. A lot of updates, these hearings, just chaos has been erupting at them. But first, here's Trump's most recent remarks, speaking much more moderately publicly about this.
I mean, I'll let you know we have to get a vote, but we have a lot of support for that bill. And if that happens on top of all of these trade deals that we're doing, this country will hit a point that you better go out and buy stock now. Let me tell you, this country will be like a rocket ship that goes straight up. This is going to be numbers that nobody's ever seen before. That's a very important element of all of this. You know, if we get that, if you don't, and the Democrats are fighting it only because they want to fight. They have Trump derangement syndrome. You know, if it was somebody.
So that's his argument, that Republicans, as you saw in that headline, they're just grandstanding, the ones who are against certain parts of this big bill. And then Democrats, they're just fighting to fight. It's not that literally protesters in wheelchairs are coming into the hearing saying, please don't cut my Medicaid. That's not what Democrats are concerned with. They just want to fight for fight's sake. PBS reports tax breaks tallying more than $5 trillion, but also sizable reductions in Medicaid healthcare, food stamps for older Americans, and green energy strategies to fight climate change are all up for debate Tuesday as the House Republicans launch marathon public hearings on their big, beautiful bill. We'll check in on these marathon public hearings because they've been really chaotic. I told you about the protesters coming in and saying, don't cut my Medicaid. And then you have members of Congress, because they went on so long, falling asleep in the middle of these hearings. It's been mayhem. Here's the footage of folks in wheelchairs coming in and saying, I rely on Medicaid, and protesting on the floor of one of these hearings. Yeah. This is the moment we're in. So bad that even Republican Senator Josh Hawley, do you remember when all the Republicans said we were crazy for saying they were going to cut Medicaid? Well, guess who's now telling us that they're going to cut Medicaid and he doesn't support it? A Republican. Josh Hawley is saying to my fellow Republicans, please don't. This is, maybe he cares about the folks that he serves. Maybe he does. Or maybe he just knows that it would be a political catastrophe for the sake of justifying tax cuts for mostly wealthy folks, taking health coverage away from low income folks. I mean, and food. I don't know how you get a single seat in a midterm with that being Trump's major agenda.
Medicaid. Do you agree with the speaker? Is this bill not a cut to Medicaid?
Well, the right thing to do is not to cut Medicaid, so I'm glad to hear him say that. Manu, it ought to be just a basic foundational principle. It is wrong to cut health care for the working poor. And that's what we're talking about here with Medicaid. My state is a Medicaid expansion state. Over 20% of Missourians, including hundreds of thousands of children, are on Medicaid. And Mono, they're not on Medicaid because they want to be. They're on Medicaid because they cannot afford health insurance in the private market. These are working people and their children who need health care. And it's just wrong to go and cut their health care when they're trying to make ends meet, trying to help their kids, trying to make sure that they're able to provide for their families. So I hope that the House GOP and the Senate GOP will get the message here. By the way, President Trump has said the same thing. No Medicaid benefit cuts.
Josh, I really appreciate a lot of what you just said there. That the thing I think you should work on is not lying about what Trump wants, okay? You did a lot of good stuff. That the thing that maybe you should not do is lie. Because yes, it's true. Trump has said that. And we know he's fine with it. That's why he keeps doing the caveat of, but we're going to get the waste, fraud, and abuse. Because what they're doing is not admitting, like adults, what they're doing. That's what they're doing. Is not admitting what they actually intend on pushing through here. And so the goal is to convince people that, oh, it was all waste, fraud, and abuse. But guess what you can't do is convince the people losing their health insurance that they were the waste, okay? That's not going to work. That's not going to work. And hopefully people mobilize if indeed they get this through. A lot of strange moments from these quote unquote marathon hearings where members of Congress were literally falling asleep.
Kustoff. Mr. Kustoff, no. Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Fitzpatrick, no. Mr. Stubbe. Mr. Stubbe, no. Miss Tinney. Miss Tinney, no. Mrs. Fishbach. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore. You there, Mr. Moore?
Mr. Moore.
All I gotta say, he's in a slumber. Like he's having some dreams. Mr. Moore. And then podcast listeners, giggling is happening. Good giggling.
Mr. Moore, no.
Well, it's not that funny, but all right, Mr. Moore. But it's not just him. You also have Debbie Dingle here as well. Just absolutely. I don't even sleep this well in my bed, and they're sleeping so soundly. So soundly. Very strange. Now here you have an exchange that seems to indicate even the promises that you would say are better because they aren't beneficial to the richest among us may not be followed through as this bill develops.
Okay, on tips. The president has said your tips will be 100% yours. Does this tax bill continue the payroll tax on people's tips?
Yes, it does, Mr.
Overtime. The president said your overtime will be tax-free. Does this bill continue the payroll tax on overtime?
It does not exempt overtime from the payroll tax.
The president has said he's going to remove taxes on Social Security. Does this bill remove taxes on Social Security benefits?
The legislation provides an increased exemption amount.
But does it remove taxes on Social Security benefits as promised by the president?
It does not change Social
The president and the Republican.
All right, so we'll wait to see the final version of this and then go through each detail. But even if they got all of the more pro-working class cuts through here, what we're seeing is the extent. It is shameful, regardless of what they do keep, that I'm not as opposed to. Now, some things like no tax on tips, I've explained more the broader economic theory behind why I don't like that. But I want people to be supported any way they can in lower income brackets. But there's going to be such a large chunk of this that is for the top 1%. And to be doing that in a time when you say simultaneously we have to cut, by some estimates, say $700 billion, $800 billion from Medicaid and SNAP is not literally, but criminal. Tim Burchett got asked about these cuts on the street.
How can you assure the American people Medicaid will be cut?
How can you assure your Nana that you still support her after she told you that chocolate milk is not coming around the house?
Congressman,
What?
What the hell was that?
I don't know, Don. Let me read this. How can you assure your Nana that you still support her after she told you chocolate milk comes from brown cows? Hey, Tim, let's leave the cute, folksy, and slightly infuriating phrases to John Kennedy, okay? Let's leave them to him, because as much as I don't like him, I just have to admit, he dropped a bar. He dropped a bar. Let's listen.
My Democratic colleagues say that, well, we didn't get anything for it. If you believe that, I'm not saying you're the dumbest person in the world, but you better hope the dumbest person in the world doesn't die. It was.
I really don't like him. I'm stealing that, though. That's good. You may not be the dumbest person in the world, but you better hope the dumbest person in the world doesn't die. That's fire. Okay, but Tim Burchett doesn't have the same delivery, and I don't even like when John does it. And you're mocking. He's mocking the question of how can you guarantee Medicaid cuts won't go through, which are currently in the writing of the bill. So they definitely are trying to push that through. Maybe the Josh Hawleys of the world will change that, but they're really trying to get these, as many times as they promised it wasn't going to be there, and they even temporarily took it out, but then they put it back in, cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. They are pushing that through. Now, you heard John Kennedy in that clip talking about the context was China and the trade negotiations and what they called a deal that wasn't really a deal. Here is economist Justin Wolfer speaking on the incoherence. Trump, in the first clip we looked at, talked about how you have sort of two parts. You have his tariff policies and then you have his legislative agenda, and they both need to work in tandem. But the tariff approach here is so fundamentally economically incoherent. How could it possibly accomplish what he's promising it to?
China sells a lot more to the United States than it buys. Now, I know you'll probably say, well, that's not such an issue. Is that trade imbalance going to change, though, in the foreseeable future? Do these tariffs achieve what the Trump administration hopes they will?
Okay, so I am professionally obliged to say a two-country trade difference, bilateral trade deficit is the term of art, isn't something one should ever care about. I have a trade deficit with my local shopping centre. I go there all the time. I spend money. They don't spend any money buying economics lectures from me. But when I come home from the shops, actually, I'm delighted with all the wonderful produce that I've gotten. And I feel that that's a very healthy relationship. And that's how I wish we would think about our trading partners. So it's not going to fix the US-China bilateral trade deficit. It's not something we should want to fix either. But then the other thing is, as much as that's one of the rationales the president has used for his tariffs, they shift every single day. Some days he wakes up and he says, oh, what I want is to threaten tariffs so I can make a better deal. Other days he says, I want really high tariffs so that I earn a lot of revenue. Now, you can't do both of those things, because if you make a deal, you're not getting revenue. We have tariffs on China because we're using that as a stick to get them to try and reduce the amount of fentanyl coming into the United States. We've had tariffs, some have argued, for national security reasons, others to onshore manufacturing, and on and on and on it goes. This is a policy proposal looking for a rationale, and honestly, they still haven't found it.
That's what it is, because Trump got obsessed with tariffs for whatever reason, in thinking that they would do some things that they won't do. And so then everyone around him started working double time to think of a justification. All right, he wants to do that. Let's think of a justification. But because he changes his mind every 2 seconds, they have to change their mind every 2 seconds. So it's pressure, it's negotiating, it's to lower their tariffs. It's actually to have permanent tariffs to bring jobs back. But that's probably the craziest one, which is it's using the tariffs, which you can do, to onshore manufacturing jobs. And there's the trade-off of, do you want to do that and make things more expensive, or not do it and keep things more affordable? That's kind of your trade-off, right? And more complicated, but to think of it that clearly. So if that's the case, the necessary part of that approach would be permanency and stability. So you say, we're going to put 20% or whatever it is on China or on this industry, and that's going to be in place indefinitely. So companies adjust. But if they don't know what it's going to be tomorrow and then the next day, and some people are saying it might drop all the way to zero, so you might as well just wait it out and not invest in new manufacturing here, or shift to a different country because that country is currently not being tariffed as much. There's no clarity about what they should do. So even the goal objective that he's saying doesn't make sense, but the goal changes more than it seems HBO is changing their branding. HBO Max lives. This is a variety piece. Max is changing its name back to HBO Max this summer, 2 years after deciding to drop the HBO. So they went from HBO Max to just Max, and now they're going back to HBO Max. And Warner Bros. Discovery says, returning the HBO brand into HBO Max will further drive the service forward and amplify the uniqueness that the subscribers can expect from the offering. It is also a testament to WBD's willingness to keep boldly iterating its strategy and approach, leaning heavily on consumer data and insights to best position itself for success. We're doing this to keep serving our consumers better. How? Who cares? It's HBO Max now. All right, the app's different. Cool. But even they changed less than Trump's tariff policy. Ba-doom. Charles Gasparino, who's a Fox contributor, said, last thing I'll say on trade before I hit the gym. That's unnecessary. Last thing I'll say before I go get absolutely ripped. My biceps are calling, but let me say this first. No one needed to know that, Charles, but okay. Proud of you. We literally went from predictions of millions of people screwing in little screws. Tariffs will plug the $2 trillion budget deficit and pay for no tax on tips. Plus, you can live with $2 instead of 32. Let's make a deal with China. Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense. And I think Wolfers explained it well to Chris Cuomo here.
Right, but they say, Professor, that's the way you
Did I say Chris Wolfers? Justin Wolfers, if I did.
Right, but they say, Professor, that's the way you onshore the jobs. That's the way you get it back. It's going to be a little tough for some of the people who've been pigs at the trough of all these cheap goods and supplies. If we want to bring them back, there's going to be a little pain, but there'll be long-term promise for the majority of Americans who work those jobs.
Mate, if you want to onshore jobs, do you think 90-day pauses are the way to do it? Do you think tariffs rising from 10% to 20% to 54% to 84% to 125% to 145% falling back down to 30% is the way to do it? Do you think having a regime where none of us know what the tariff rate is going to be next week, let alone next month, is the way to bring in a factory that requires a 50-year investment? So there is an argument to be had whether tariffs are a good idea or a bad idea. I'm generally against them, but we can have that argument. What there's not an argument about is that this is a sensible, productive way to have tariffs. The way we're implementing them chaotically, we're going to get all the costs, for sure. Stuff from China is more expensive. Supply chains are breaking down. The benefits would be if businesses saw an environment that were friendlier to them over the next 50 years, they'd want to build a factory. Trump hasn't shaped that at all. All he's done is created this sort of paralyzing chaos that means we're going to get none of these benefits.
Professor Wolf.
Yeah, summed it up nicely there. Maybe said it a little better than I did. Dang it. Curse you, Justin! And then you have a MAGA account saying, the left won't like this. And it's reports about the stock market surging. Still not making up for what it lost, but surging nevertheless. Do you know why, Trish? Her name's Trish Reagan. Do you know why, Trish Reagan? Because Trump backed off of his own plan. You can't celebrate that. The left does like it. Me likey, okay? I do like it because it's him walking more and more away from what he said he was doing when he reduces tariffs and does these pauses. So, of course, the stock market, when Trump stops doing Trump things, goes, yay! We're back to not even close back to, but we're moving a little bit in the direction where we were when Biden left office. Because that was a really good time for us. Trish. Come on, Trish, be better. I always thought better of you, Trish Reagan. Share your thoughts in the comments. Get the bonus show by clicking the join button on YouTube below. And then get the live show tickets, lukebeasleyshow.com/live.